I'm Siti Shakira Mdisayadi with metric card number A152746. So I'll be explaining about what is wild children and what is critical period hypothesis. So, what does it mean with wild children? Wild children are children who are isolated from human contact from a very young age due to abandonment. They are also called as feral children. And here are the examples of wild children cases. Ginny, Oksana and Edik, Chelsea and Victor.
So guys, I'll proceed with the child's background. Okay, you guys see the girl in the picture, right? Her name is Ginny Willy, but don't be misunderstood. She is only known as Ginny in order to protect her privacy and identity. It is because since she was just a toddler, her entire life had been suppressed by the terror she endured all alone in a single dark room. She was born on 19 April 1957 and she is from Arcadia, California, USA. If we talk about Ginny, when she was 20 months old, her father, Clark Willy, thought she was mentally retarded and locked her up in a bedroom and started to abuse her. But Ginny's story came to highlight on November 1970. A social worker discovered the 13-year-old girl after her mother sought out service to release her. So we can see that Ginny was abused when she was 20 months old and she was rescued when she was 13 years old. Okay, so that's all about her background. Now let's move to the next point. We'll take a look about her history, how she was abused. Since she was 20 months old, her father locked her up in a dark small room located at the back of the house. The windows were covered with aluminum foil to keep the sunlight and nosy neighbors out, and the only furnishings consisted of a cage with a chicken wire lid and a child's potty chair. Ginny's life prior to her discovery was one utter of deprivation. She spent most of her days tight-necked to her potty chair and only able to move her hand and feet. When she made noise, her father will beat her. He also kept a gun in his lap at all times as a means of intimidation. Her father even forbade her mother and brother from talking to her, and the rare times her father did interact with her, it was to bark or growl. For nearly 11 years, she suffered at the hands of her sadistic father. It was not until Ginny was 13 years old that her abuse was discovered and she was rescued by her mother on 4 November 1970. Her mother, who was nearly blind, sought public assistance in Temple City, California after leaving her husband. When a social worker met with the family, Ginny's appearance and condition gave away the sinister secrets. Both Ginny's parents were charged with abuse, but Ginny's father committed suicide the day before he was due to appear in court, leaving behind the note stating that the world will never understand. After going through Ginny's history, I am wondering, how could a father treat his own daughter like that? For you guys, please accept your children for the way they are. The last point is about Ginny's language acquisition. First of all, we'll take a look on her initial language acquisition. When Ginny was discovered, she wore diapers and she could not speak, but she had the language and motor skills of a baby. She also crawled along the floor like an animal. Upon investigation, law enforcement officials established that Ginny had the physical development of an 8-year-old and weighed only 59 pounds. Because she was horrifically abused, she deprived of cognitive stimulation most of her childhood, and a pediatrician identified her as having some type of mental delay. So, researchers were left to wonder whether Jeannie had suffered from cognitive deficits caused by her years of abuse, or if she had born with some degree of mental retardation. She also unable to apply grammatical rules and use language in meaningful way. Because her only human contact was when she's being fed or beaten. But it was before she got the treatment. After she got the treatment, her language acquisition became better and slowly improved. Despite scoring at the level of a 1-year-old, upon her initial assessment, Jeannie quickly began adding new words to her vocabulary. She displayed cognitive ability of 2-year-old at the age of 14. She started by learning single words and eventually began putting 2 words together much the way young children do. She proceeded from one word to telegraphic stage slowly. Curtis began to feel that Jeannie would be fully capable of acquiring language. After a year of treatment, she even started putting 3 words together occasionally. Apart from that, Jeannie's understanding is more advanced and developed better than her speech production. She understands, imitates, and responds to gestures, but often ungrammatical when building complex sentences. She also takes a long time to comprehend an instruction. So that's all about her language acquisition. I think that's all about the feral child, Jeannie. If you want to know more, you can search on the website Jeannie, A Scientific Tragedy by Ruth Reimer, or you can click the link below. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, you guys. Okay, so for my part, my group is going to present about feral children or wild children. It means children who are raised in an isolated family or children raised in a wild environment. This is my mind map. So let's start for Chelsea. As you can see, Chelsea is not a wild children, but she's a feral children. It means she was born in an isolated family. So the first point is, let's zoom in. Okay, her background is, actually Chelsea is a girl. So the background is Chelsea is born in an isolated family. She began to learn language at the age of 32. Third is she is mistaken for being deaf at birth because the scientist that found her wasn't able to determine whether she is partially deaf or mute. And fourth is that she is not given any form of language or training. Her language acquisition challenge is at first she had trouble mastering the rules of syntax because she doesn't know how to construct sentences with all the grammatical rules. The second is that after several years of helping her acquire language, they discovered that she was born with partial hearing impairment and later with hearing aids not produced but that was given by the scientists that helped her. She was able to hear speech relatively normal. The third is up until 1970, this is according to research, deaf people were sometimes misdiagnosed as retarded. So we are coming back to Chelsea was first discovered as deaf because they couldn't determine whether she is partially deaf or mute. So they just concluded with deaf people are mostly retarded, misdiagnosed as retarded. Next is her language acquisition development. Chelsea had a very impressive development because she developed extensive vocabulary. She had syntactic profile, appears to lack any word order, so she is actually having a great improvement in her language acquisition. Unfortunately, she is unable to form grammatically correct utterances and remain on topic. Fourth is this is the future her. She is 50 years old now and has held a job that requires her to read and write. Her job actually helped her to continue on developing her language through writing and reading. Fifth is she is reported to be actively engaged in social interaction and independent because she learned language when she began to learn language at the age of 32. So all of this can be concluded with the critical age hypothesis, where it doesn't mean that whatever age you are, you have difficulties in acquiring language. It depends on your exposure to the language. So the discussion of the whole research about Chelsea is that one of the scientists named Curtis debated that Chelsea's ease proves that beyond a critical period, other aspects of language can be learned but not syntax. So the language, she can learn the language but not the rule syntax, meaning how to construct the sentences with no grammatical errors at all. So the second is that Chelsea's abilities in this scope was not sufficiently assessed. This was just this was just discussion and not valued enough. So the fourth is that crucial date for critical age lie in syntactic understanding and not production. So Chelsea was not experimented or researched enough because she was 32 when she was exposed to language. So she wasn't given the time to be experimented enough or be researched enough to actually prove the critical age hypothesis. lie in synthetic understanding. So the fourth is what she has in common is that she has some similarities with the other wild children, which is Jeannie, the girl who's been abusive, who's abused Victor, who was a wild children, and Chelsea did not learn much language. So the three of them have these three similarities which they weren't given enough time to be researched and experimented enough to be proven to be related to the theory. So that's all from me by Chelsea, for Chelsea.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And hello everyone, I'm Noshada Aliza binti Seman and I'm going to continue this video presentation. So, I'm going to present about Victor, the wild boy of Avern.
Created using Powtoon.
These wild children cases can be related to critical period hypothesis. Critical period hypothesis suggests that it is important for children to be exposed to language at early ages to acquire it, especially for the first few years of life. If the children miss the critical age, it will be impossible or harder for them to acquire it. Therefore, from the wild children cases, we can conclude that critical period hypothesis is inconclusive. There is no exact age for critical period, and it varies according to individual. Other than that, critical period hypothesis also suggests that the wild children might experience slow development of language acquisition. They also might experience damage in left hemisphere. We also found that the earlier the children was found and exposed to language, the better the chance for them to acquire language.
Because she never heard any words and because she was never spoken to very often, they didn't get stimulated. And because they weren't stimulated, they got smaller and less functional and disconnected, and ultimately that part of the brain literally physically changes.
With modern imaging technology, we can actually see what happens in the brains of feral children, and the effects are shocking. Without normal stimulation, their brains are smaller and malformed, and the earlier this neglect begins and the longer it carries on, the worse the damage will be.